Okay, this is Unit 3 Development. This is the 5th video. This is looking at adolescence section. It is going to be covering the biological, psychological, and social of an adolescent. Two big people that will be discussed in this video are Lawrence Kohlberg's theories of development and Erik Erikson's theories on development. Okay. Again, kind of back to our main overview here. We have the adolescent section, and specifically, it's going to cover the biological, psychological, and social development. I would start with my notes on page 12 and 13 in the packet. Okay, so first it kind of gives you an understanding of what an adolescent is. Many psychologists once believed that our traits were set during childhood. However, today psychologists believe that development is a lifelong process. Adolescence is defined as the time between childhood and adulthood. It is the time spent morphing from a child to an adult, usually about the ages of 13 to 18. It starts with the beginning of sexual maturity and ends with the social achievement of independence, which today we begin to question, when does social independence really go into play? G. Stanley Hall was the first to develop the term adolescent. It's known as a term for kind of the storm and stress of one's life. Way back when in the early 1900s, there was just pretty much childhood to an adult. Okay, children would go to work at 12, 13 and help the family with money and funding. And not that that doesn't occur still today, but we also have in our society built in a time period where you go to high school and you really begin to develop your identity. Okay, so the biological impact on adolescent. Puberty is a time when we mature sexually. This is a time marked by a surge of hormonal growth. During puberty, primary sexual characteristics develop. This is the reproductive organs and the external genital areas. They develop very rapidly. We also have secondary sexual characteristics that develop. These are the non-reproductive traits. So you do have to know the difference between primary and secondary. Primary are going to help you create a baby. Secondary are the other things that assist that development. So female, what marks the beginning of the female time period is what's called the menarche, which typically happens at 11 years old. It's their first period. Okay, but again, we see that it's happening earlier and later in today's society. Physical maturation usually continues till about 16. Okay, so you continue to grow hair, your breasts still continue to develop at this point in time. Your primary sexual organs are your ovaries, okay, and then secondary sexual characteristics that develop are your hair, your breasts, and your hips. Usually your secondary begins to develop first, so a girl at the age of 10 might beginning to develop buds, her breast buds, and hair might be coming in underneath her armpits, okay, and then she actually has her first period. Males, it's known as the spermarchy, which begins to produce sperm. Sometimes there's a nocturnal emission, about 13 years old. And usually physical maturation occurs until about 18 years old. So you can see that there is a difference between boys and girls here. Usually boys are a little bit delayed by about 2 years. The primary sexual organs for a male is the testicles, and the secondary is hair, and then the deepening of voice. Development on puberty in society. So boys, when they develop earlier, early maturation provides more muscle and they gain height. So you might be seen as the popular kid. So it's kind of a cooler thing, like for society. Sometimes if you do develop earlier for boys, it's often seen as successful in schools and sports and in the social setting. So the boys that develop a little bit later might struggle socially. Okay. Girls, however, the early development of breasts and hips can be more stressful. They're being pointed out as different at an earlier age. They could be teased, and they have to deal with sometimes sexual harassment. So again, this is an example of how nurture and nature are impacting one another. Okay, because your biological is growing earlier, that could be having an impact on your social setting down the road. Okay, so here's just a diagram of the physical development. I know this is in your textbook. Okay, for the woman, you have the underarm hair, which is a secondary sex trait. The breast development, secondary. Okay, other things, you have the pubic hair, which is also a secondary sex trait. And then you have the enlarging of the uterus, and you also have the ovaries begin to develop a little bit more mature. And then the beginning of menstruation. That's all kind of the primary sex traits. Okay, and then on the other side, you have obviously the facial hair on the face and under the arms, the larynx enlargement. Okay, those are all secondary traits. The pubic hair for the male, and then you have the primary sex traits for the male. It's the growth of the penis and the testicles. Okay, so the biological development, we kind of just talked about it. Adolescence begins with puberty, the sexual maturation. Puberty occurs earlier in females than in males, 11 for females, 13 for males. Thus, height in females increases before males. This is another be impacting your development. Okay, so here's a nice little chart. You have the age and years underneath. So if we look at the red line is girls and the blue line is boys. So the red line, you can see girls at one point in time at about 12 are actually taller, okay, 12, than most boys their age. So this is kind of a little bit maybe a difference between boys and girls at that age. And then boys begin to catch up a little bit, and you can see that by the age of 14 and 15, their height is toppling over girls. Biological brain development. Until puberty, neurons increase. Okay, they increase their connections. So you can see here as a child at birth, he has very few connections. At 7, there is a huge growth of brain development. And then at 15, it's beginning to prune off, kind of what I talked about before. However, at adolescence, the selective pruning of the neuron begins. Unused neural connections are lost to make other pathways more efficient. So if you're not using those pathways, let's say for a certain language, you're not using it, or you're not using it to play a certain sport, those begin to prune off, and then the ones that you use on a regular basis are becoming more efficient. Okay, so we just finished the biological section. We're moving now on to cognitive development. You should be familiar with the cognitive development because we've talked about it. For adolescents, they should be at the last stage, which is the formal operation stage. Adolescents should have abstract thought. They're developing moral reasoning. They're out of that concrete stage where they're just beginning to learn the main concepts and grasping analogies and all that. And there's really a higher level thought process going on here. So adolescents' ability to reason gives them a new level of social awareness. In particular, they may think about the following. They may think about their thinking. Why did I think that? How did that happen? What are others thinking? Now you understand, now that there's others in the picture, what others are thinking about them. Now you're worried about, oh my God, did they see me say that? Oh no, why did they say that? Why did I say that? That was silly. Okay, and then how ideas can be reached. So they criticize society, parents, and even themselves. They look at maybe a law, or maybe they got in trouble and their punishment, and they kind of thought about, well, that wasn't really a good punishment. In order to fix this problem, they should have done this. So there really is that analytical process that's taking place. You're developing reasoning power. According to Piaget, adolescents can handle abstract problems. They can perform formal operations. So adolescents can judge now good from evil, truth and justice. And if they are Christian, they're thinking about God in deeper terms, or maybe they're questioning if they believe in God and so forth. You also are beginning to develop morals at this point in time. Beginning in childhood and developing more into adolescence is the ability to determine right from wrong. Piaget believed that children's moral judgments build on cognitive development. He thinks a lot of what the kids in their moral decisions was based on a lot of what their parents were thinking. And at this point in time, we now understand what our parents are thinking, what our peers expect, and now they're taking a stance on their own. So Lawrence Kohlberg, here's another person you need to know. He came up with the morality theories. He sought to describe the development of moral reasoning. When do we develop our moral ideas of what is right and wrong? He posed moral dilemmas to children and adolescents, and it was called the Heinz dilemma. Okay, should a person steal medicine to save a loved one's life? And then through that, he saw that pretty much people are slotted in 3 different areas based on their answers. Okay, most of the kids before 9 showed they wanted to do it to avoid punishment or gain a reward. Okay, so the reason why they did this, and if you look at the ladder, it's all the way at the bottom of the ladder. Okay, I better do this, okay, or mommy or daddy will be mad. Okay, so they're doing it to avoid punishment or to gain some sort of reward. Conventional is the second area on the ladder. Okay, you're understanding the rules and laws, okay, of society. So you're not going to steal because you don't want to get in trouble with the laws. Not so much just worried about your parents' beliefs anymore, but this is now the laws. And then the last one is post-conventional, and if you look at the ladder on here, it's the toppest ring. Okay, it affirms people agree upon the rights or follow personally perceived ethical principles. So I don't care if it's the law or not, it's just not fair. So maybe you're going to go and steal that medicine because you believe that everybody has a right to that medicine. Okay. So there's that. Again, the pre is all the way at the bottom. I better share this toy or mommy will be mad. Another perspective would be if you drive too fast, you will break the law. That's the conventional idea of it. And the last one could be, I don't care if it's the law, it's just not fair. So if you were caught speeding, the reason why you wouldn't speed is because in the first one, mommy or daddy would say it's bad. Okay. The second one, you're going to get a ticket with the law. And the third one, maybe you should speed because you need to get somewhere in order to help someone. Or you shouldn't speed because you don't want to hurt anyone while you're speeding. Alright, so Kohlberg's theory of moral development, morality develops during adolescence. They kind of saw that environment can influence your morality. So who you hang out with can influence your decisions that you're making, that top post-conventional thought. Think about World War II. There were some good soldiers working the concentration camps, good men, but the reason why they did it was because the society forced them to do that. Okay, you can teach delayed gratification to your kids at an earlier age, and they're less likely to exhibit bad impulses and maybe have better moral decisions, is what they recommend. As our thinking matures, so does our behavior, in that we become less selfish and more caring. People who engage in doing the right thing develop empathy for others and self-discipline to resist their own impulses. So the Heinz dilemma, okay, kind of what I was talking about before, should we steal the medicine? And we'll talk more about this in class. Okay, the first level is the pre-conventional morality. Okay, so they shouldn't do it right or wrong because maybe they'll get punished by their parents, or maybe they'll be rewarded by their parents. So they look at just basically the punishments and rewards because they're 5 or 6 and they're very young. And so the only people that are really kind of impacting their life at this point in time is their parents. The second one, conventional. Okay, this happens pretty much like we kind of were talking about from 9 to 11 or 12. They're thinking about society. Okay, they're thinking about moral now. There's the world that they're living in. Okay, if they break the laws, they're going to get in trouble for it. Okay, they're in the school setting. If they do this, this is what's going to happen. All right, and then the last one, post-conventional. This is what I would see adolescents beginning to develop. Okay, it's not right, it's not wrong. Maybe it's right or maybe it's wrong, but now you have the ethics to back it. It's not good for human nature. I don't have a gut instinct. If I don't steal that medicine and my mom passes away, that's not fair for her. Okay? Alright, so then we now, besides the moral, we're getting into the social aspect. This is Erikson's stage theory. Okay, Erikson, his development theory of the 8 stages of man was unique, and it covered the entire lifespan rather than childhood and adolescent. So now we're going to talk about the social aspect of adolescence, but Erikson also looks at the entire lifespan of an individual. So in your book, it talks about it specifically at adolescent because this is a big time period for your social pressure. However, his theory is going to stretch way back from when you're an infant to when you're an old age. So think back to infancy and childhood. Some of the stages we will learn stretch back to that time period. Okay. In your packet, it is the last page that you want to be working on. It is the very last page, Erikson's stage of development, that you want to fill this chart on. Okay, so Erikson's theory overall, Erikson's view was the social environment combined with the biological maturation provides each individual with a set of crises that needs to be resolved. Okay, the individual is provided with a sensitive period in which to be successfully resolved each crisis before a new crisis can be presented. Okay, and Piaget's stages are also important. They influence the cognitive development here. So let's take a look at this. The first stage that Erikson says we go through is from about birth to about 18 months. An important event that's going on in their life right now is feeding. Okay, so he describes it as infants form a loving, trusting relationship with their parents because the parents are always providing them with the nourishment. Okay, they also learn mistrust. The parents are not providing them with the care, the attachment, the hugging, the food in which they need. Okay, they know who to turn to for food and comfort, and if the parent isn't providing them, they're not going to gain a sense of trust. So the first stage he believes is really important in terms of understanding trust versus mistrust. The next stage now you move on to is the kind of like the toddler age from about 18 to 3 years. The big event occurring in this one's life is, yes, toilet training. Okay, but they're also beginning to be, energies are exerted towards walking, grasping. Okay, they're beginning to become mobile by themselves. Okay, the child learns and becomes independent. Right? Child may also feel shame and doubt and often confused. They have a lack of confidence. So it could go one or two ways. Okay, autonomy, which you're giving them an opportunity to walk around, you're assisting them, you're telling them great job, you're providing them with a lot of opportunities to learn how to, mobilize by themselves, crawling by themselves, potty training by themselves, you're being very positive. Or you're not providing them with that and they're becoming very shameful and that they can't do anything and that nobody cares about them, and every time that they fall down, no one's there assisting them with the hand up. Or, you were bad with, you didn't use the toilet, and so now you went to the bathroom in your diaper and now you're going to sit in that diaper. Okay, they're going to be very confused, they're going to lack confidence, and they're going to kind of fall under that shame and doubt category. Okay, so then you move on to the next stage, which is 3 to 6 years old. Okay, you're beginning to become more independent by yourself here. Okay, so now you felt very confident. Okay, you felt like you just got out of that last stage with a lot of autonomy. Now you're going to be willing to take that initiative on your own. Okay, I need to go now into a preschool classroom by myself, and now you're going to be able to have conversations with other kids. Child becomes more assertive, independent, masters peer relationships. Or however, you were that parent that was very shame and doubtful, you were confused. Now you're going to be very full of guilt or full of, you're going to lack confidence going into that preschool room. You're not going to form friendships. You might just kind of becoming very isolated. All right, so it keeps building on one another. Industry versus inferiority. So this is pretty much childhood stage from 6 to 12. A very, very important thing that's occurring at this point in time is school. Okay, the children must deal with the demands to learn new skills while risking a sense of inferiority and failure. You're beginning to adjust to your peers. You're beginning to take on competition. You're beginning to try like a lot of new activities, sports, or are you going to be inferior because you feel like you have no trust, you have shame and doubt, you didn't feel like you mastered the initiative to try new things. Okay, so now you feel inferior and you won't leave the house and you don't have a lot of friendships and you feel like you're doing poorly in school. So this is when you enter the adolescent time period. Okay, teens must achieve now self-identity while deciphering their roles in occupation, politics, and religion. So this is a big age because you're forming who you are. So identity. Okay, identity. Adolescents are trying to understand their sense of self. Their adolescence task is to solidify a sense of self by testing and integrating various roles. All the stages up to this point are impacting the development of self. So trust versus mistrust. We talked about that. Are you going to be becoming a trusting adolescent? Or are you not? Are you not going to have any friends or not going to trust any of your friends or relationships? Autonomy versus shame and doubt. Do you feel like you're able to do stuff on your own? Do you feel confident, initiative, like that you can take that? Do you feel industry where you can take on competition and you're very aware of who you are and that you can get things done. All right. So if you kind of lack the four earlier stages, it can kind of be detrimental to the identity of yourself. Think about all the other peer pressure that's occurring at this point in time during adolescence. If you don't know who you are and you don't trust anybody and you feel guilty and inferior to all these people around you, you can kind of be getting into hazardous behaviors that may occur. Okay, your sexuality is beginning to develop. You can tamper in that. You could tamper in drugs and alcohol. Okay, you can tamper in other things of like stealing and corruption. Okay, so forming your identity and forming those 4 prior stages is really important to kind of becoming who you are. Identity at this age can be greatly influenced by your parents or your peers. On the other hand, it can have a really positive thing. You really understand your sense of self. You're striving better in school with peer relations. You could be doing really well in sports and academics. That can be a positive as well. Social identity is big. You're beginning to understand we aspect of our self-concept, part of our answers to who am I, okay, and who are you a part of the group as well. Research. Peers who have successful relationship with their peers are often in successful relationship with their parents. Girls who have open relationships with their mom also have open relationships with their girlfriends. Again, this is the opposite. If you don't have good relationship with your peers, you probably don't have good relationship with your friends. If you don't have good relationships with your mom, you may not have good relationships with your peers. Your dress is really influenced by your peers at this point in time. However, your careers and spirituality is really your core beliefs, the values that you have are really influenced still by your parents. So then you kind of enter the next stage, the young adult, intimacy versus isolation. This is the young adult stage pretty much from 18 to probably 30, 35. However, we're noticing that adolescent is beginning to shift later and later, okay, because they don't know their true self until college. But here, young adults, kind of the way Erikson faced it as about 18 to 35. The young adult must develop marriage-seeking relationships while otherwise deciding they want to live on their own. So now once they really understand their identity, they can enter either intimacy, I want to get into a relationship with someone, or isolation, I don't. So you're beginning to emerge as the adult. For some people in modern cultures, the transition from 18 until mid-20s becomes the emerging adult. So some people believe there may be another stage in there where you're kind of understanding what your occupation should be before you can really understand the intimacy versus isolation. But we're still going with Erikson's. The next stage is intimacy versus isolation. This is the emerging adult, though, is the time where the gap between adolescent independence and full independence and responsibilities become heavily weighted on the young adult. Intimacy is the ability to form close and loving relationships, a primary developmental task in late adolescence, early adult. And this might happen in late into your 20s and early 30s still today. Okay, then you have the generativity versus stagnation. This is the middle adult years, pretty much from your 35 to maybe 50. Important aspect of this time is parenting. You assume the role of parents, and it signifies the need for continue the generations while avoiding the inevitable feeling of failure. So they're kind of questioning, do my kids like me? Do I like my job? Or am I not doing enough for my family and for society? And then you have the last stage, which is integrity versus despair. This is late adulthood. Important event is just life reflection. You're accepting your life accomplishments and the sense of fulfillment, or do you feel that despair that you didn't do enough? Okay, so you really need to know Erikson's stages of development. Make sure you have the years that are broken down, the different stages or the names of the stages, and then different tasks that could be occurring at this time. So recap, we looked at adolescent development, we looked at the biological changes, the cognitive changes, and the social changes. We also looked at some big people, key figures here. We looked at Piaget and his stages of development, Kohlberg, pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional, and then we looked at Erikson's stages.